We've got two themes for our show tonight. It's our special player pool episode where we break down some of what stats and what positions to get where for value. And we'll also start on our undervalued ATC players, previewing some potential bargains this week at the catcher position. FSWA Hall of Famer Todd Zola joins us next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy ATC Day to you. Joyous holiday to you. How you doing, Ruvain?
I'm doing well today. What does that exactly mean to you?
Well, the ATC projections have hit. The first cut are here. A bunch of my sites that have it, CBS Sportsline, Rotoballer, and of course on Fangraphs. And especially awesome today is that the ATC projections now include WAR. You can actually get a WAR per player, which is kind of interesting. So very excited.
And how often will they be updated, do you think?
So for the first month or so, it's going to be probably once a week. The first week, just to get out a bunch of errors, probably going to do it every couple of days. And as we get all the way into March, it's going to be 2 or 3 times a week. So you'll see it come fast and furious. We're hoping, of course, that the season starts on time. Spring training will go, so we'll get more information to make better updates. But that is the plan, Ruvain.
Very cool. Sounds great.
Well, we've got a great show today. This next guest, well, he writes at so many different places. You can't even mention all of them without running out of the clock here. But his home base is Masters Ball, and he is an FSWA Hall of Famer, the one, the only. He's been on our show before, but welcome back, Todd Zola. How you doing, Todd?
Gee, I'm doing all right now. Places I used to write for would take forever, but we're down to RotoWire and ESPN. It's not so bad.
All right.
A couple
Cool.
sites I think people have heard of.
Yes, definitely. And we're glad you could join us for the show. As we are accustomed to on the show, we just jump right into it in our strategy section tonight. Before we talk a little bit about the player pool, which is our theme for tonight, we're going to talk just a little bit about projections, which you do projections over at Masters Ball. And just wanted to ask you, what is new for your projections, or have you changed any of your methodology heading into 2022?
Yeah, I bought a new set of darts this year. So, yeah, the old ones were getting dull, so I got a new set.
Nice.
Well, not really a whole lot new. There are some new expected stats out there, which I'm incorporating in some regression levers. We're still dealing with 2020, the short season, 2019, the happy fun ball. So there's maybe more massaging than I've done in previous seasons. I guess the big change is on the pitching side. I'm paying a lot more attention to logical left on base percentage and logical BABIP. I used to just kind of do the projection, let it fall where they may. But in order to get those two numbers, you need to project plate appearances and at bats, and it's kind of sketchy. It's more of it's another guess, and I don't know if it was worth it. So I thought this year, let's make it worth it. Let's see if it helps any to, after doing the projection, check out the left on base percentage and the BABIP, and bring those into the logical areas, because those are not out of control of the pitcher. You guys know that, but there's less control. Regression takes over. So that's the main change. Having to go through pretty much every pitcher one by one to make sure the BABIP and their left on base percentage are logical.
Right. Couple of questions that I get myself about projections in general is, number one, how have you treated the designated hitter in the National League? Are you going to assume it in 2022, even though we did not have it last year? And the other question is, have you adjusted for Baltimore, where Baltimore decides that they are going to move the wall back and make it higher? And, of course, the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays, hoping to go full-time back to the Rogers Center, have you adjusted for that at all?
Yeah, now, as far as the DH goes, this might be the last week I'm doing it with my own projections. I'm actually providing pitchers with and without the DH. Hitters was too much work to carry through 2 playing time grids, so I'm just assuming there is going to be a DH. Looking at the downloads of people who are using which set of stats and just what other people are using now that other sites are doing work, etc. Most everybody is projecting with an NLDH. Derek Carty, the bat, you mentioned ATC. These things are a lot of these that they're just making that assumption. So I think I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to assume that there is going to be a universal DH. And what I have to do then is again, we kind of mentioned on the hitting side, just you have to account for the at-bats. There's just another batting place in this batting order, and account for the at-bats, and maybe a little bit higher offense. So the run and RBI index maybe go up a little bit. So if you're going to project Mookie Betts for 100 runs, maybe now gets 103 or something like that, just as an example. But the pitching's where you got to really make the difference, because to do projections, you need to neutralize what the player did, what the pitcher did, and that's taking out the park and taking out any of the weird stuff that went on that particular season. So if we're projecting every NL pitcher to face a DH, need to neutralize their stats from the previous seasons as if they faced a DH. Now, of course, they did in 2020, so that one's taken care of. But you had to adjust, when you neutralize, you got to neutralize 2019 and 2021 as if they faced a DH, and then you can do your weighted averages and bring them up, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's spreadsheet work. So it's easier. It's actually easier than batters because you don't have to carry through 2 playing time grids. So the computer does the work for me. I have to figure out what's the difference. Well, you actually walk fewer batters when you face a DH because you're not intentionally walking so many. So their walk rates actually go down, actually will go up with the DH. But strikeouts and home runs, those suffer. So you make those adjustments and see what happens.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. Derek Carty messages me, and he's like, "Hey, Ariel, are you using the DH in the NL?" And I'm like, "Well, so far it looks like most projection systems, at least on Fangraphs, had not yet." So I'm like, let me get back to you for a second. And I called up Jared Cross, and I spoke to Jason Martinez, who does some of the playing time over at Fangraphs. And we basically we all got together, and we made the determination, you know what? We're all going to change over. We're all just going to make it full DH in the NL. So that it just got together because we had to talk about it. And the truth of the matter is, if we think it's going to happen, it's better to do the most likely outcome. Kudos to you for carrying both all this time, by the way.
Well, the other aspect of it is people are drafting as if there will be a DH. So from a practical point of view, which is, from a business efficiency in my business, which is better, to spend an extra hour preparing 2 sets or to spend that hour on fresh content?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the decision I made. And we'll see what happens if it turns out that, it goes the other way. This time last year, we had a discussion. We probably would have said there's going to be a DH. But as we know how that turned out. ESPN, we're going with, assuming a DH, and we'll see what happens there too. But you asked about Toronto and Baltimore. Well, Toronto's the easy one. I mean, you just have to estimate a park factor to neutralize last year's numbers in Buffalo and in Dunedin, and then just use the standard park factor for Rogers Center, which, because it's a dome, it's fairly, no park factors are stable, but it's more stable because it is a dome. I guess it depends which way they have the air conditioning blowing, but at least from that end of, the trickiness is how did you neutralize last year's with Buffalo and Dunedin, and those are both hitters' parks, and there wasn't enough data to come up with a number, so it's kind of hand-waving. See, Baltimore's going to be interesting, because you've seen the Twitter, you've seen all the overlays, you've seen, well, Mancini loses this and Hayes loses that. They're only talking about home runs. And the best numbers I saw were between 14 and 19% of a decline. And it's not all right-handed batters, because lefties that go opposite field, and I know Rudy Odor and Cedric Mullins don't, so you don't have to worry about them. But other lefties that go the other way, they're going to actually be hurt more, not on a per home run, but on a relative basis, percentage basis, because you don't hit the ball as far the other way. So a righty can still clock it and get it over the fence, but a lefty's going to lose home runs too. So it's just a guess based upon that 14 to 19%. But here's the catch. All we're talking about is home runs. We don't know how the park's going to play in terms of runs. Fewer homers doesn't necessarily mean proportionately fewer runs. You've seen the design, the right angle with the bullpen and the jetting out. That's going to be a tough left field to play. It's going to give more hits. It's going to allow for more hits. Is the center fielder going to have to move over because to back up the left fielder with that quirky field out there and leave right field a little bit more open? I don't know how it's going to play. We can guess home runs, but we're hand waving hits and runs.
Yeah.
I don't think people are thinking about that. I think people just go, oh, it's going to they're going to hit fewer homers. Well, I think they're going to get more base hits and doubles and triples. I mean, the triples and they're going to be triples. In that, and I don't know that anybody's actually hit a triple in Camden Yards yet.
Yeah,
I think the next one might be the first, but a little hyperbole there. But you could see some weird stuff going on. So I think we have to. Yeah, all right. Santander is going to hit fewer homers, but I think these guys are going to have an improved batting average, and I don't think it's going to help pitching as much as many people into it. I just, maybe Jonathan Means, because his main issue is home runs, he gets helped. But some of these guys, they're going to be giving up more hits. There's going to be fewer outs. And I think that I don't know how it's going to play. But my gut says I'm wary of runs not dropping so much in Camden Yards.
So is that going to mean that it's going to be much harder to stomach rostering any Baltimore pitcher besides John Means? I mean, relievers, their relievers are a crapshoot anyway. You don't know who's going to be a closer there. You don't know what's going to go on there. But I mean, even the starting pitchers, if they're going to be more runs, it's more of a chance of a blow up. That's more of almost like a Colorado type setting.
Well, they don't have anybody other than Means to actually talk about, right? I mean, if there was, it would have been an interesting conversation if there was someone on the borderline.
So today's episode is called the Player Pool episode, and I've gone to the regional first pitch forums, and I've heard you do a great job talk about what you see this year, and I wanted to really pick your brain about certain aspects of the player pool. Let's start with starting pitchers, Todd. In recent past, we've seen the starting pitcher player pool been very top heavy. We've seen these very seemingly low risk pitchers at the very top. And consequently, the ace starters have been pushed up. It seems that that's happening again this year, although I see quite a bit more risk at the very top, which might make me more intrigued to take pitchers in the middle. Question is, what have you observed, and how do you think you're going to be tackling starting pitching going into 2022?
Well, I think the observation is spot on. You got your Jacob deGroms and your Chris Sales with the injuries that are contributing to that. Garrett Cole with the sticky stuff. I mean, we can go on and on. But there is a bit more risk up top. And you can, Corbin Burns, his risk is he's only, darn, is he so good? Look at the GIFs. Look at the movement. He's only done it once. Well, maybe once, a year and a half. So I agree that there's the risk. And we have to, need to point out that a lot of talk this time of year is NFBC because that's what's going on, and that I know a lot of people listen that play in home leagues, etc. And it's a different environment. Pitching, you mentioned the low risk. NFBC is also a monkey see, monkey do sort of thing, and people had success drafting pitching early. So the Lemmings started to draft pitching early just because there's some of that involved as well. So just have to keep in mind, when you're looking at an ADP, if it's NFBC, it's its own entity, it's its own economy. But having said that, I do agree with the overall assessment. There's a lot of risk up at the top, and there's just uncertainty with innings and Jack Flaherty. Another one of those riskier type pitches. Zach Wheeler has thrown 200 innings so many years in a row, except for 2020, of course. And my research has shown that it's very, very difficult to do it a fourth year. But he's done it for 3. So what do you project Zach Wheeler? Do you project 180 because other pitchers in the same boat have only thrown 180? Or, geez, the guy's done 200 for this many years. He's going to do 200 again. I mean, maybe not exactly 200, but that's sort of theory. So I agree that there is some risk. But the way I approach pitching, and I think you've heard me say it, and probably in one of the the seminars you just mentioned, my motto is draft the pitcher, not the round. And you hear so many people say, well, I'm not taking a pitcher till the fourth, or I have to get a pitcher by the end of the second. The way I think you need to approach pitching is, I don't target draft. I don't believe in it. But what I will do is kind of figure out where I want my ERA and my WHIP to be at the end of the draft. And I'll design several pathways to get there. And maybe I'll have an ace pathway and what I need to supplement my ace with. I'll have non-ace. I'll have two guys in the second range to, bang bang in the fourth and fifth round or whatever it might be. So I'll construct several pathways that the end result is my target ERA, my target WHIP, and I'll include closers in these pathways. And now this is the draft the pitcher, not the round part, is if one of these pathways just happens upon you. If you're in a draft and you're ninth pick and Garrett Cole's on the board, well, I'm going my ace pathway. If he's not there and you don't get a pitch until the third round, well, I'm using this pathway. And the point being, though, if you're going to use the path, you can't. If that tier of pitchers going, if you need, I'm trying to think of a name, kind of a second. If you need Logan Webb to make it work, and oh man, I can't draft Logan Webb here. His ADP is another round. I can't take. Well, you have to take him there. To make your plan work. Don't draft the round. You have to draft the pitcher when the market is taking him.
Okay, moving. Your thoughts?
I was actually taking a look at the ADP right now for the NFBC, and right now I only saw about 8 or 9 starting pitchers going in the first 2 rounds. Last year, last year I think they were closer to 10, 11, even 12 going in the first 2 rounds. So I think people are a little bit concerned about that risk, and they're backing off just a little bit just because there are so many question marks on these top guys, and there's really no certainty. And the injury, 1 out of 2 pitchers get hurt during the course of a season. If that happens, there's so much risk there. But there are still people who are going to go after it, and I think the lockout, if the lockout goes a couple weeks into the season, it puts, I think, even more value on these top starting pitchers, just because how many innings are you going to get out of the second tier guys if they're not going to be completely built up if there's a shortened spring training? It makes these top tier guys that much more expensive, and I think that much more worth it.
Yeah. So, by the way, Zach Wheeler, you mentioned, he's actually the highest innings projected pitcher that I have on ATC at 196. Very interesting that you mentioned it. But, yeah, I mean, that's the way projections go there. I've been a big proponent of you got to go where there's a good return on investment. And we have seen that in the past couple of years, the 8 starting pitchers have returned a much better return on investments than some of the middle rounds. And, it's hard to make the argument that just because it's happened, it means that in the future it will happen. But, I can see a point this year where there's a lot of great middle pitchers. We're talking Max Fried, Joe Musgrove, Kevin Gausman, Frankie Montas, Dylan Cease. There's a lot of pitchers in the middle, and currently in the ADP, the pitchers are spread so much in every round that you can pick your own path. And I think that the value proposition where you say, I'm just going to take the best value proposition where it is and not worry, I need to get an ace in the first 2 rounds. I have to have an ace, a pitcher after the first 3 rounds. I think that you can let the value come to you. And if you have to draft the first 3 rounds hitters and then you go pitcher, you can end up with more value that way. I would not have you have to this year. I think that the return kind could be good in all rounds. That's my feeling here.
Yeah, outside the fact that I won't debate now, the word value is kind of inappropriate, but that's beside the point.
Well, value is yes. Well,
we'll save that. But yeah,
valuation.
Valuation is it's potential. It's not value. Without its values past tense, we don't know what the value is. But there's a lot of potential profit at that point.
Sure.
But as long as you know what else, so you're drafting, your first pitchers in 4th and 5th, which is fine, as long as you know what else you need to make that work without the ace. Yeah, there are pathways to make it happen, and you don't need to finish 12 points in every pitching category. You can finish a little lower in pitching and just crush hitting and end up with the same number of points at the end. And then it's actually a way to it's actually a smart thing to do, because as you know, all it takes is one pitcher to emerge and you're suddenly getting 12 points. Because of one out of 7 starting pitchers has two relievers has a lot more effect than a out of nowhere second baseman, because there's 14 bats and it's just a smaller percentage of the overall contribution. But one starting pitcher that comes out of nowhere can really help you a lot. I had something else. I forgot what it was going to be. If it comes to me, it comes to me. At this point, I don't know, but I don't recall. But that's what it is. Eric, you mentioned those pitchers you rattled off. Maybe it's just my rankings versus the market, but you mentioned second or third and whatever middle guys. A lot of those guys were in my top 15. So so I don't know that they're middle guys. They're just end of the first round, early second round guys, as opposed to top 15. So that's the other way. And to use the word value, that's the way to get your value or your higher potential return on investment. If you make up, I don't know that I do, but if you got Logan Webb or Kevin Gausman ranked 11th or 12th and the market's drafting them 17th or 18th, well, you now have your SP1, at an SP2 price. So you can still, that's another way to approach it.
Yeah, the current ADP in the NFBC, there are 4 starting pitchers in the first round. There are 4 starting pitchers in the second round, 5 in the third, 4 in the next, 4 in the next, 5 in the next, 4 in the next. It's pretty spread through. The pitchers I rattled off are 4th, 5th round pitchers. So you can find a path to working the starting pitchers anywhere. You can take the 15th starting pitcher in the third round. That's your SP1. You don't have to get that ace, is what I'm saying this year.
Yep.
With closers, though, we're seeing something very, very strange. Now, closers, it's bounced around over the past couple of years where closers pushed up, closers pushed back. It is pushed up to no tomorrow. And part of the reason is it's early. We're early on here. A lot of people are doing the more draft and hold, especially in the NFBC where we're generating ADP. It's draft and hold type. So you can't pick up anything on the waiver wires in the middle of the year. And we're seeing Josh Hader, Liam Hendricks going in round 2. It's crazy to see a closer there, but the reason why you're seeing that is saves are very variable nowadays. They're hard to find for your fantasy teams, the lower supply of sure things, and that's why you're propping up the demand to going there. So the questions for you, Todd, is first, do you think that it is economical to pay this steep market premium for closers to push it up that much? But also, could you tell us a little bit about what you think the closer pool looks like? And I'm thinking not so much towards the top. How do you see the middle and late closers going this year, and where do you think the value is?
So I wrote about this. It came up on RotoWire today, mentioning just this whole thing with the closers being pushed up. They are draft champions. Therefore, so you say, I'm nervous. I don't know that I'm going to speculate. I can't get a guy on Fab. Therefore, I'm going to lock down my saves. But at what cost? And the other question that no one's asking is, what do I need? What do I need to compete in the draft championship? And this may be surprising. How many saves do you think? How many saves do you think? I won't play guessing games. You need about 50 to 55 saves. The top 3 last year, 2021, the top 3 in each league averaged 50 to 55 saves. And I don't know that you need to lock down 35 of them in the second round. I know it's risky trying to find them later, but you don't need 80, 85, 90. I mean, you need 90 saves to win the category. You don't need to win the category. The teams that cashed in the NFBC DC finished in around 9 points in saves. You just don't need to lock down 35 saves. And I know Hader and Hendricks will help ratios. I'm kind of leading that crusade. I understand that. But to me, it's what you're leaving on the board, the opportunity cost. I'll take my chances. If I miss out, all right, I missed out. But I think you're going to miss out on more by not taking the stud hitter of the pitcher. I know in a DC, it's as much attrition So you can counter the argument, maybe you're going to. You can counter the argument with, I'm not as concerned in draft championship because it's all about attrition anyway. So I'm going to draft a really deep hitting lineup. So I'm not going to lose as much oomph at the top because I'm going to make up for it with my depth later and multiple position eligibility. But even so, to me, if I need 50 saves, I don't know why I need to get 35 of them in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I often bring up the jewelry store terminology or metaphor, I should say. But let's say you're going to a grocery store and everybody is charged with you got to have a complete meal. You got to have your entree and your appetizer and a dessert and a bottle of wine, and maybe the saves are the dessert. And you go to the store and the desserts are just not as good as they used to be. So everyone's like, okay, well, I got to have a fabulous dessert because I can't leave my guests coming at the end without anything. And everyone's, I got to pay up for the desserts. But you say to yourself, wait, it's just a dessert at the end. It's just the last thing. What in the world do I have to pay all that much for? And that's sort of how I feel here. I think that the value that you're getting by sacrificing a second-round pick is tremendous. We talk a little bit about a lot here about categorical risk. That what happens if you have that Josh Hader and he gets hurt? You are screwed. The replacement level of that is going to be much, much lower, and you're not getting that second round hitter that you could have gotten otherwise. When closers were pushed up to the fourth round, and that was steep. Well, everyone was doing it. That was an appropriate market premium. I think that the market premium this year is insane, and I would advise against paying that. I think that the better play here is to pick some gems in the middle rounds, to throw more quantity over quality at the end, and to take advantage of the fact that, yes, as you mentioned, Todd, there are fewer saves, but also that a lot of middle relievers and relievers that have high skills count even more these days, especially since there's less innings in total. Those relievers count a lot at the end, so they're valuable even if they don't close. I think I'd rather take those darts for that overall value. Anything to add, Ruvain?
Yeah, besides that, why would you want to have a reliever in the second round or in the beginning of the third round instead of getting a starting pitcher? If you get a starting pitcher, you're getting more bulk stats. You're getting your bulk stats for ERA, WHIP, strikeouts, and wins are not coming from the closer. The closer you're getting, it's one category. Yes, you can have a guy like Hendricks who will get a ton of strikeouts, and he can equal a number 5 starter. He could equal a number 5 starter. But if he doesn't, like let's say you plan on getting Edwin Diaz last year and he just didn't pan out because he didn't strike out the guys you wanted to. You could have had a starter there that fills out your stats in ERA, in WHIP, in wins, in strikeouts, and you're like you said, Aria, you're leaving so much value on the table. I mean, you really want to take a Liam Hendricks in the second round or a Josh Hader in the second round over a Teoscar Hernandez who can carry your team, over an Aaron Judge who can be an MVP, who can also carry your team offensively. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's the highest it's ever been, and it because the closers are so fickle, and because closers can lose their job just like that, you don't have any trust in them. I'd rather, just like you said, quantity over quality, draft 4 closers, but they don't have to be in the first couple rounds, because if you get 4 closers, if you get an average of 10 saves from those 4 closers later on, you're good. You're going to get to that 55 save plateau.
So I want to move to corner infielders, and let's do this a little bit quickly here, especially since we've talked a lot about this on the show here. I'll go to you first, Ruvain, just to confirm here. We've seen that the first base pool is a little bit deeper here in 2022. I think just upon inspection of the ATC projections, there's some nice bargains later on that make me think, why would I in a straight draft take Freddie Freeman in the first round, early second round? He's a great player. He's solid. He's low risk. I get that. But you're passing up the opportunity to get a huge bargain later on. Whereas in third base drops off quite a bit. And I think my observation is that the player pool for third base is much worse than usual. By my Z-scores, I look at Z-scores for replacement level. I get a negative 3.9 this year. Back in 2019, 3.4. 3.3 in 2018. So the real worth of the bottom third baseman really has gone down enough that it really should push up those third basemen. Jose Ramirez, to me, might be more intriguing than Juan Soto because that third base position is hard to fill out later on, and you don't want to buy somebody in the middle when you need to take some steals or some saves or some starting pitching. So I kind of think that third base is something that you really need to address quickly. Rafael Devers, he's looking pretty good in projections. He might be a good early second rounder to cut. Take a chance on Anthony Rendon. Take Nolan Arenado, who's going to bank stats, but really address it. Don't go out of the 10th round without getting your third baseman. But the first baseman, you can actually wait till much, much, much later. Do you agree with that, Ruvain?
Yes, and you can get a lot of bargains at first base also. If you want to get a guy at first base who hits 20, 25 home runs and won't kill your batting average, you can get a CJ Cron later on. You can get a Bobby Dahlbeck, a Frank Schwindel who's going very cheap. You can go someone like that. Third base, after you pass the first top 10 third baseman, you're looking at going after Ryan McMahon, who's eligible there, Heimer Candelario. You're looking at Matt Chapman. You're looking at Eduardo Escobar. Do you want those guys? First of all, you're gonna have to overpay for them. Number one. Number two, first base. When people think of corner, you think of power. First basemen have power. They're not what you're losing at third base is value, and I think that third base is very, very shallow, and you can even wait even longer. Like, why not even wait till you get to go even farther down? You want to get an average guy. Stick Luis Arias at third base. Spend $1 and overspend it and spend more, let's say, in the outfield, because you're not going to get that much if you're not going to get one of those top 10 to 12 third basemen.
Todd, thoughts?
I agree with the general consensus and the layout of the pool. Where I may disagree slightly. Well, first, I'm not. If Freeman is the best player on board, I will take him because I still have a corner and I still have utility to get the bargain a little bit later. Unless if there's two guys that are tied or close to tied, sure, I may fade the first baseman and get one later. But I think that the deal with third base is there's no quality at the top, but I do think it's kind of like second base has been. I think there's enough. You mentioned Ruben about getting these guys at the end. You don't want a $1 or 23rd round third baseman, but if he's ranked, if that's where he's ranked, if that's where his value is, if you will, then yeah, I mean you're not overpaying. I don't think you have to overpay for the lower end. I think there's enough at the lower end that you don't have to egregiously push up a Manny Machado or a Devers. If they're going to fall into your lap, I mean, yeah, Ty's going to the third baseman, but I'm not going to panic and push up a third baseman just because there will be somebody at some point by the end of 23 rounds that's at the top of my list that is, it's also available. It may not be to the 17th round, but they'll be there, especially because, as you guys know, once you get past the 10th or 11th round, I mean, the next 5 rounds are essentially the same if you use your dollar value to rank. If you sort by dollar value, it gets to a point where, at the beginning, there's a $15 difference between the first player and the last player drafted in the first round. There's a $1 difference between the first and last player in the later rounds. So they're essentially the same. So, I may reach a little bit in the middle, but as long as I have the guy graded as one of the top, whatever it is, 15 and a couple utilities, top 20 third baseman, I'm fine with it. I get what I expect. I just don't expect a lot. And now you have, you got the season to upgrade that spot. But I do agree. Ramirez, I mean, he's my second or third player right now. And it just comes without even giving a positional bump. I would, if I leave a draft with Jose Ramirez, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, the only counter to that is, I mentioned that the replacement level is lower than usual. When the replacement level is lower than usual, if you settle for the dollar at the bottom, the replacement or somebody you're going to be fumbling around with at the bottom, if you're going to swap out or stream, is crappier than usual. It's like the catcher. Do you really want to get the 30th catcher as your second catcher? I don't, because then you're fumbling around with garbage. Whereas if you had a one catcher 10-team league, well, I'm okay with get something at the bottom because the fumbling around is actually at a higher replacement level. So a little bit of a propensity to go a little bit more this year.
That's assuming that nobody juts out and overproduces at that range. That's you have to think positively. If I do get a lower third baseman and someone emerges, well, I'm getting the profit that I'm getting over where I drafted him is now huge. So the argument can go a lot of different ways. Yeah. The other thing too is, more often than not, you're not going to get your last one. The way the rankings go, if I need a top 15 guy, I'm not going to get my 15th. I'm probably going to get my 11th or 12th guy, and at the cost of a 15th. It's taking a chance, but they're there. But yeah, in general, there's help on the way. Josh Young and there is help on the way in third base. So the way these things are, they're cyclical. And one of the reasons first base is so strong is because guys like Vlad went over there.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. All right, middle infield, and the question to you, Todd, is I'm not going to talk about the overall player pool other than steals. Do you think that you need to get steals from the middle infield, or can you say, I'll get it elsewhere? I don't actually need a steals guy in the middle. How does that work for you?
It really, if you don't, it forces you down that Miles Straw route, or a little bit deeper into somebody who isn't even going to produce as much as Straw. It's a supply and demand. It's not a position. It's not like use your Z-scores to figure out position scarcity, but it's a statistical scarcity. There's just not a lot of steals available from other spots, unless you're going to go the Adalberto Mondesi road at third base. Now that he's a third baseman, imagine that. But yeah, I think and this is where you can't just go by rankings, because players do. If you do your dollar values and you rank your sort accordingly, they're just so close that you just can't. Oh, he's at the top of my list, going to take him. You do need to start looking for players a little further down the list to address a need, because they're essentially the same player. If they're within $1, they're $2, they're the same player. So I do think, I don't want to say always or never, but it certainly helps a lot if you can get some of your steals from second base, because the only other place you're going to get them is the outfield. You're not going to get them from first or third, right? And you're going to get them from the outfield, and everybody's looking to get them from the outfield. So I think you do need to address. I think you do. Forcing it, but I think tie goes to the steal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a recognition of the player pool, of that the steals are located in a certain spot. And if you're going to go three middle infielders, second, short, and a middle without steals, who you're getting, you're going to have to push up something. And so the value proposition is probably better if you do have at least one nice chunk from a middle infield spot. Any disagreement, Ruven?
No, I think we've been doing this for years. We've always been saying you want your power from your corners and speed up the middle, and the pool hasn't changed. It's just the way people think about it. I mean, for years, the shortstop and second baseman was where you get your stolen bases. The center fielder is where you get your stolen bases. So the pool hasn't changed. You still have to get them, and you have to get them early, because otherwise you're going to be grasping at straws, literally, both in the outfield and down low in the middle infield.
Yeah, and when Ruben and I put our auction strategies together for every single auction we do, I'm not too concerned about, is it a shortstop that's going to be $20 or is it a second baseman that's going to be $20. We basically put down 3 middle infield spots. We put down, we want a $25 one, a $10 one, or a $5 one. And it's not that we want that number. It's we see that there's potential for a bargain at those spots, and those are hot spots. We might get it, so let's put down a couple of names that would fit. But one of those slots has to go to speed. And we do that also at the outfield. One of the spots has to be dedicated to a guy who must get speed. It's something you just got to ensure yourself as you're playing in an auction, and the same methodology in a draft. Last player pool question, outfielders. Question to you is, is how does the strength of the outfield position compare to previous seasons? But the bigger question to you, Todd, is do you look in a draft to grab outfielders early especially? Think that you can wait on them late? Or do you intentionally spread them out throughout the draft? Do you say, I'm just going to go where the value is? How do you work the outfield? Do you even have a strategy for when you take outfielders?
I don't shy away early. You want to leave a couple of either spots on your auction roster or your draft roster late, because as we mentioned, everybody's going to rank players differently. It is usually the outfield, just because there's so many of them, that you're going to find that you have differences in the room, and you can get guys with a higher profit margin because you have them ranked higher than the room. But I'm not going to shy away from them early to leave those spots, because there's 5 spots in a utility, and there's so much multiple eligibility now as well. I don't shoot for one either. We're talking about speed. I have to get one of the top speedy outfielders, like Acuna, or Betts, point, the I'm going to address speed early. The inventory to do that is risky this year. We don't know. It used to be able to say Trout in that same breath. We're not sure. It's just we're not exactly sure, or the number of $40, $35 outfielders that contribute 15 to 25 steals. Well, there's injury issues or other issues this year. That inventory has been depleted, so it's going to be real interesting how people do address steals. And the other thing you find is on the best laid plans, this always sounds so good on paper, and you can do it in DCs, but towards the end you get with the platoon guys. So I like to focus on, and this is where valuation is flawed, because it assumes that players are active every day of the year. But if you're taking a guy, I'll use my old friend Cole Calhoun, who's going to hit much better against right-handed pitching, and you're only going to play him against right-handed pitching, his slash line is his value when he's in the lineup is higher than it's going to be on a cheat sheet. So what I do like to do at the end is try to find players who have some leverageable split, whether it's a good home park. Maybe, this is where the Baltimore guys might come into play, or even Colorado, or, just being a left-handed batter, and in the NFBC with a 3 and 4 day roster changes, get 3 righties up. Well, this he's going in. So that's one of the things I do try to do. And we talk about doing the main event, but then you get 2 speculative closers and 2 guys are hurt, and you get a stream and a starter. You just don't have the bench spots to do it, but you can do it in the DC.
Ruvain, what are your thoughts and plan about when to grab an outfielder?
Well, last year it seemed like the outfield player pool was so shallow, and so many people were getting hurt. So many top outfielders were getting hurt that I think it's best you can't shy away from those top guys, but there's so much value in the middle of the outfield pool right now. Mitch Haniger, you can get at a nice price. Carl Schwarber, you can get a good nice price. Alex Verdugo, who's a good for your average, you can get at a nice price. Those 3 guys, they may not be those top guys, but if they fill out your outfield as, let's say, your 2, 3, and 4 spots, and you get a top guy with that, then you're good to go. The problem is that last year so many people got hurt. And it just seemed like when you're going on looking at going for free agents, looking who's available, it looked like there was nothing available there. All you had were platoon guys. You have to find the guys who are also not only platoon to start. Otherwise, you're going to end up with both sets of what happened to me. I ended up both sets of platoon in San Francisco, where you have all 3 of them. You have Austin Slater. You had Lamonte Wade, and it was just you had to plan and use their splits to your advantage. Just like Todd said, if you know they're going to play a couple lefties, you set your lineup this way. And if you don't get those middle guys and you lose out on the top guys and you're stuck at the bottom, you're in deep trouble.
So what's happening too is multiple eligibility. There are more outfielders filling in for your injured infielder than ever before, because they're a better better than the backup infielders are. So that puts the scarcity to the outfield, at least fantasy wise, because there's so many dual, second base outfield, third base outfield, first base outfield playing middle and corner now compared to previously.
Yeah, that is what's going on, and it is affecting the player pool. As I said with third base, that there's a trend downward in the replacement level. The same thing is true about outfield, whereas middle infield, it's pretty much stayed the same. So relatively speaking, we are seeing that outfielders are getting worse, meaning that formulaically they should be bumped up a little bit more. As far as spreading it, in general, you want to go where the value is. But as I often say, you want to be able to put yourself in a position to get a bargain at every price point. In an auction, it's especially true. You want to have the ability to get a $30 outfielder, the ability to get a $20 outfielder, the ability to get some bargains at the $10 level. And if you say, I have to get big ones or I have to get small ones, you're just not going to be playing everywhere, and you won't afford yourself the ability to get those bargains. I mean, imagine if you didn't have a $1 outfielder spot. You're going to miss that $7 outfield that comes up that it costs $1. Right? Todd alluded to this, but if you have no outfield spots open in your auction, at somewhere at the end of the draft, at the end of the auction, there's going to be a guy. Oh, he's worth $7. Oh, I can't buy him. And that's a $6 bargain. Maybe you liked the guy earlier, but if he only produced a $2 bargain at the $15 level, you missed your chance of getting that bigger bargain later. So it is generally a good idea to spread out where you're going to play to get that. Granted, of course, I don't want to have 3 $1 outfielders at the end because, as Ruvain said, that they're pretty much garbage at the end. And the playing time matters. You're getting a lot of outfielders platooned, but then you're getting a lot of these middle infielders or corners or these multi-positional players that are getting more playing time because they're multi-position at the bottom of that slot. So I think the best use of it is to really plan for going up and down and let the values come to you and not deciding intentionally to do one way or the other, but knowing that pushing up is probably a little bit better idea on the whole, especially because the replacement level is lower. All right, it's time to do start our ATC undervalued players. The ATC projections just came out today, and what we do on the show is we preview this by position because it organizes ourselves, and we don't go through the entire player pool or rank them and say, here's the top 10 shortstops. What do you think? What do you think of this guy? Instead, we focus on just a couple of players that ATC preliminarily identifies them as a possible bargain, and then we take a deep dive and say, I think that guy actually makes sense as a bargain, where maybe, hey, we don't really agree with that bargain there. Let's not focus on it. So let's go through a bunch of players here, and tonight we're going to do the catcher position. Just to note, in terms of numbers, I'll often quote, he's a this dollar player or he's going in this round. I'm going to be talking in general about a 15-team mixed 5x5 league, an NFBC-style league. I know that everyone plays in a different format. There are people who play in 10-team leagues. I play in 10-team leagues as well. But we have to have some standard to say numbers, and because NFBC has a very good, robust ADP, it's very good to compare to market. So you'll hear me talking about that. Before we start the player catcher pool, now it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
Well, as we're going to start talking about catchers, the first catcher we're actually going to be talking about is Yasmani Grandal. Last year, the top 5 home run hitters leading their position in catcher were Salvador Perez, Mike Zunino, Will Smith, Gary Sanchez. Yasmani Grandal was number 5. The top RBI guys for catchers last year: Salvador Perez, Will Smith, JT Realmuto, Yadier Molina, Mike Zunino, and Yasmani Grandal was 6th. So my question today is this: where did Grandal rank in at-bats for catchers last year?
He was hurt for a while, so it was not very high. I don't know exactly where. I mean, I just know that he missed part of the middle part of the season. I'm going to say 8th, 9th, or 10th, somewhere in that range. I don't know, though.
Okay,
I'll go a little bit lower. I'm going to say 16th.
He was ranked 28th. He only had 279 at-bats and still hit 23 homers, 62 RBIs with 60 runs. He may not have the best average. His K rate was down. His walk rate was up last year. His BABIP was a little unlucky. He was at 246. He's a little older. He's now 33. He only played 93 games. That's what the 279 at-bats come from. And he's projected to bat in the middle of that potent White Sox lineup. Most of the metrics were actually pretty stable for his whole career, except his home run to fly ball rate went up 10%, while his actual fly ball rate stayed basically the same. So there's a chance that you can get a good value here because you know what? If he gets more than those 279 at bats, you can get more than those 23 home runs. You know what average you're going to get, and if you want a top catcher, he could be a top 5 catcher, even a top 3 catcher this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going roughly where Salvador Perez went last year. It's hard to make a profit on Salvador Perez this year. His price is so high. But this is a guy who, as Ruvain mentioned, his barrel rate is up. He's got a great contact rate, great walk rate. We talk a lot about the ATC interprojectional metrics, the volatility metrics. He's as steady as he goes there. His standard deviation is 1.7 in terms of value, which means projections agree on him. He's so solid, and the price is just a little bit lower than the market than what we think the indicated price is. It might be a nice, solid number 1 in a 2-catcher league for you to do because there is a market premium in catcher. You're not paying all of it by getting Grandal. Do you agree on this value, on this potential value, I should say, Todd?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned home run per fly ball. His home run, his ground ball and fly ball ratio stayed the same. So his swing path stayed the same. But his average exit velocity on fly balls was up about 2 miles an hour, which explains the home run per fly ball. Whether that was because he wasn't as taxed last season, because this was actually the case for a lot of catchers, I don't know. And can he sustain it? I don't know. But I agree, Ruben, that there's some latent power there, that if he can maintain the elevated, in your case, home run per fly ball, but the root of it is average exit velocity on fly balls, there is another level of power there. I have him. Let's see, his overall ADP when I last looked it up was about 109. I have him a lot lower than that in my ranks. But I do the pricing adjustment for catchers, and I'm not so sure that the drafters do the same.
Next catcher I want to talk about is Tyler Stevenson of the Cincinnati Reds. He actually also qualified at first base. Not that really matters. You would not draft him and put him in the first base slot. What I like about him is he is a high batting average player. Batted 286 last year, 294 the year before. ATC projects him as a 270 batter with 14 homers, 62 runs, 57 RBIs. His contact rate is 18%. It has been going in the 11th round. Is this a good bargain for you, Todd? And might you even prefer Tyler Stevenson to Grandal?
Well, I really you've hit on two guys that, and you don't even use my stuff in the ATC, and nope. I agree with the result in that these both guys I have them ranked ahead of the market, or I would. They're both, to me anyway, where they're currently being taken. It says a lot to me that Cincinnati traded Barnhart. It's Stevenson's job. He's the bell cow. I don't see anybody else that's going to even come close to taking any playing time from him. There is some. He could increase the power. You mentioned the BABIP, the line drive. Line drives. It's not a particular sticky trait, but he has a penchant for hitting ground balls and line drives, which will prop the batting average up. So. Yeah, I like Tyler Stevenson a lot. He's going to have the volume. He's got a great park. And he's going to be hitting, unless Cincinnati does something weird and, spend money, he's going to be hitting a good part of their order.
Yeah. Ruvain, do you disagree?
I disagree a little bit, only because last year his ground ball rate was close to 50. Now, that can get him more hits, but he's a catcher who's hitting the ball on the ground. That's a little bit concerning for me. When I hear a catcher hitting the ball on the ground, I hear double play, inning over, no RBIs or anything like that. But he does hit it for average, which is good. But a lot of times when people want a catcher, a number 1 catcher or number 2, they're looking for a 20 home run catcher. You're not going to, or 25 home run catcher with a low average. This is not the typical catcher. You're going to get an average. You maybe get 10, 15 home runs out of him, but he's more of a contact hitter. And again, if he can limit those ground balls, he'll have and hit more line drives, he'll be better off.
Next catcher is Mitch Garver. Garver, according to the ATC projections, is a nice bargain. He's an $8 player going for $4. He's going in the 16th round right now in the NFBC ADP. We're talking he's a 20 homer type catcher. 240 batting average, but still has plenty of value with good run production statistics. The nice thing about Mitch Garver, he's got a very low intra-standard deviation of 0.36, meaning his categories are relatively balanced. You know, if he somehow gets injured versus a different catcher, you're not finding a replacement. You can find anybody. There's nobody is going to adversely balance him. You're not missing a whole chunk of this, whole chunk of runs, whole chunk of homers. He really provides a nice flavor for the typical catcher. Last year he in 200 at bats he hit 13 homers. My God, imagine if he plays all that much more. I have him projected for 370 at bats. Sounds like a little bit on the high side. My only objection with my projection system is I think the at bats are a little bit high for him. He's never done that type of thing. But even if he only goes for 310, 320, still a bargain and somebody who I think I'd be comfortable taking as a number one catcher. Do you agree with that, Todd?
Nope. Finally, we disagree. No,
Okay.
I think there's a lot of risk in Garver. I think that the bats are high. The injury prone, I don't know, but he had a bunch of injuries last year, and he's got a quality backup with Ryan Jeffers. Right now, if they both stay healthy, to me it's a 55-45, and I'm not sure which guy's on the higher side of that. And so I think that Garver is a playing time risk, and the power is there. A high average exit velocity on fly balls, but he also has a high strikeout rate. So you mentioned that the variance amongst projections is pretty small. I can see it.
No, actually, it's high. The variance among projections.
Yeah, I think it's going to be high.
Yeah, so between projections, it's very high. So projections are not agreeing on Mitch Garver at all. What I'm saying is categorically he's balanced, so he's not hurting your category.
Yeah. I see him as a risk, and if I'm not avoiding him, I pretty much have him ranked with the market. So it's just one of the I'll take a catcher now. I don't have him down as a bargain, and I think it's just because I might be shying. I may have fewer plate appearances just because of the injuries last year and the quality backup in Ryan Jeffers.
Yeah, and to note that most of the disagreement has to do a lot with the playing time, which is why the projections, why I'm getting a high risk associated with the projectional standard deviation.
Yep.
Ruben,
and I agree. And I agree with Todd with this because he's only played 100 games once, and that was back in 2018. That was 103 games. And Ryan Jeffers is a good backup catcher. Minnesota, a couple of years ago, they were playing three catchers. It was a three-catcher rotation with Williams Astudillo also. So with the way the manager and the way they deploy their catchers is not typical, so he's not going to get the full bulk of playing time, and that's the problem. Another issue that I found with him is that he pulls the ball 54% of the time. In this day and age with shifts, that's not that great. Now, again, he is spread out. He will still hit for a good average. He'll get you double-digit home runs. But with all those things, I would be happy with Garver maybe as a number two, but I'd even consider getting Jeffers as a number two as well.
The one counter, though, of course, is that high-skilled players find themselves getting more playing time. If he is really hitting homers at that kind of rate, and if he manages to stay healthy, then he's going to play, and you got a high-skilled guy, right? We're not arguing about his skills here. We're arguing about his playing time.
Well, he strikes out 30% of the time, so there is that.
He's a catcher, though.
And he's on the wrong side of 30. He's 31, so he's not a young catcher either.
Sure. Only projecting him for 240, so that bargain of $4 is on a 240 average. So, that's the deal there. Let's go to the next catcher, Carson Kelly, who's a nice little bargain. Carson Kelly has a very low volatility between projections and a very low volatility within projections. So very not risky here. I have him as another 240 catcher, 15 homers, just about 45 or 50 runs and RBIs. Got a very, very decent strikeout rate, closer to 20, 21. He's got a good walk rate. His barrel rate looks in line for a catcher. The one thing to note about him, he is somewhat streaky. He's not somebody who produces every single month. The bulk of his production often gets bunched together. Maybe that doesn't matter for a full season. Maybe it does. But he is going all the way in the 20th round. I think it's a good second catcher play to get Carson Kelly. Thoughts, Todd?
Oh, no, agree. And we don't have to worry about Varsho taking playing time. I don't think Kelly's defense, if I'm not mistaken, has improved a lot. It started out pretty good, and I think it's even gotten better. So, no, I agree. He is in that bunch at the end where we talk about if you wait to the end, you're not going to get the 30th. You're going to get your 22nd ranked guy in the 20th round, and I have him ahead of the field as well.
Yep, and Ruvain, you, and we'll also let's do also the next catcher of Max Stassi, who's not too dissimilar.
Well, first for Carson Kelly, I think I've been drafting him the last couple of years just for his upside because he shows that potential in those streaks. He's only 27, and I think a lot of the times that he misses time with his injuries, they're freak injuries. He's got a broken wrist, a broken finger, that type of thing. If he can stay healthy for a full season, there's no one behind him. He's going to get his playing time. His fly ball rate went up last year, but his home run to fly ball rate didn't. So if he can change his launch angle just a little bit, he may actually get some more home runs. As for Max Stassi, he's also the projected starter out in Anaheim with Matt Thaiss behind him, so he's going to get a ton of the playing time. Last year, he had 13 home runs and 35 RBIs with a 240 average, which is not bad. He's not a 220 hitter, he's not a 200 hitter, so it's not bad. And the lineup last year, he really didn't have that many people in the lineup behind him. So he didn't have, say a catcher has protection, but that the Angel lineup toward the end of the year, the bottom lineup did not look anything what it would look like if Mike Trout was in it or if Ohtani was in it literally every single day and not in playing, yo-yoing and back to pitching, everything like that. He did hit 278 back in 2020. So he has the possibility of hitting for average. His BABIP that year was 325, so he was a little bit lucky, but he does have that upside. He's a definite number 2 catcher for me.
Yeah, I prefer Carson Kelly a lot more to Stassi. Stassi is the zone for me where you don't want it to fall to the bottom, and you're getting him in the 21st to 22nd round. You just don't want to get that $1 catcher, but you'll take a catcher now. I could see it. He's not a guy that I have to get. 226 average ain't doing me any favors. 15 homers, I don't know. That's also decent, but his counting stats, his run production stats are okay. Probably going to split time. He's okay-ish to me, better than a lot of the bottom ones. But I'm not super thrilled by him. What about you, Todd?
Well, first, I'm not going to use a 90 plate appearance or bat sample and say that that's his upside with BABIP. I'm not going there with the 2020. But I will say that if you're into the $1 catching or the 23rd, you could even wait. What's his ADP? It's I have him at 320.
307 the last month in DC.
So that's a 20. So you can't, say sometimes you can even wait to the 24th round. Yeah, no. If I'm playing the the equivalent of the $1 catching game, I'm fine with him because I have him ranked around 200, and again, that's giving the catcher bump. So overall, I have him ranked around 200. So I can wait, and I can, to be safe, I can grab him the 18th or 19th if he happens to be my highest ranked catcher, and that's the route I'm going. I think the difference with the market is I don't think they realize that Max Stassi is the starter.
Yeah, right. No, it's a playing time thing, of course, for a lot of these guys. Last one, Luis Thorens. I think a very similar story to Max Stassi. We're talking probably not even as much power, although he had 15 homers in 346 at-bats last year. A little better average, though. Better average than Stassi at 240. For the price, I prefer him to Stassi. He's going in the end of the 26th round, whereas Stassi's going in the 21st. So you're getting a better batting average. You're compromising on 3 less homers. I actually do prefer Thorens for the value over Stassi. If I want a $1 catcher, I think I'll take all the way to Thorens. To me, he's a decent second catcher who has shown he can hit for something above 250 before. Todd?
Yeah, I have him ranked 4 spots. Given rankings are flawed and valuations flawed and projections are flawed, I have him ranked 4 spots ahead of Stassi overall, so I agree with that contention. And the thing with, we're talking about playing time, we don't know what Seattle's going to do. They've got some options there. and Thorens is among them with Cal Rayleigh and Tom Murphy. So they've got 3 catchers. I don't know what they're gonna end up doing. So that will be curious. But if you take Thorens at the end and he doesn't perform, you can find yourself a replacement. So I'm with you. I'll take him over Stassi. But they're both kind of, if I'm tiering them, they're like on top of each other.
Yeah, Ruben.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, Thorens, he may get majority of the playing time. I mean, if Tom Murphy stays healthy, Tom Murphy has shown that he could be a number 1 catcher, but he hasn't really stayed that healthy. Thorens is also eligible at first base, which makes that a little more intriguing in case you need to fill in for a first baseman. You don't want him playing first base, but that's the way it is. And of all the Mariners that are coming up in their system, catcher is not really there. You mentioned Cal Rayleigh a little bit, but I think they're waiting on, and he's only 18, that's Harry Ford. He's so far down the pipeline that Thorens is going to be the guy that he doesn't have to worry about his job, at least either as a backup or even as a starter, and he's proven that he can catch that pitching staff so far. So I think that he will get the bulk of the playing time this year.
I want to do a couple of mailbag questions, really good ones submitted here. So Big Al asks, wondering, and let's do these quickly since I just want to get to a lot of them. Wondering about strategy for catchers in draft and hold. We're talking like NFBC draft champions. How do you justify the value of plate appearances at the position when many of them come with such a low batting average? My quick answer to that, Big Al, is that if there's not that many plate appearances, the bad batting average will hurt you less. And all the other catchers are having a bad batting average at the bottom, so it doesn't really hurt you relative to everybody else. You agree, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, into whatever formula one uses, the volume gets incorporated into the formula and all flushes itself out. It's inaccurate, the flawed the formula, but that's not it's the best we have. But I agree, in DC in general, we've talked a little bit about strategy, but we've talked about a couple of situations where there are multiple catchers. And at DC, if I can draft both Minnesota guys, I love it because you're getting them cheap, and you've got the catcher, and if one gets hurt, you have a starter with the other. So I love stacking scenarios where you think it's 55-45. I don't want to get Salvador Perez's backup. He's like the Maytag repairman. He's never going to play. But I will get Murphy and Thorens. I like looking at scenarios like that. I don't draft catchers all that early in a draft champions. In a best ball, I'm all over it. But in a draft champions, it's kind of one of those things where there's no one else. Yeah, I'll take this. There's no one else. I'll take Carson Kelly. Because I know I'm going to get. I'll get my 4 or 5 $1 catchers and play who's hot or play who's got the good matchups.
Question from DT, and DT was sent me a picture of him sporting an ATC T-shirt today. So happy ATC Day to you. We're definitely going to ask your question on the show here. We'll go to Ruvain first. How do you approach the catcher position in a 10-man points league? Only one catcher starts, and there's very limited bench spots. Should you get a top 4 catcher early? Should you make sure you get a mid-range catcher? Punt and go with sleepers, leftovers? I mean, to me, the answer is just get the last catcher in your last round and then just stream all year long. You agree?
Yeah, 100%. There's no reason to spend any money on that because once it's a 10 catcher, if you're not going to get either the top one and overpay for Salvador Perez, it's in for 10. No, you get the $1 catcher. You can stream. You can play the try to pick up the hot catcher, and that's basically it. There's really nothing else to do for that.
Unless, of course, Salvador Perez is available in round, 15 or some crazy thing like that, But in general, people are going to value it as just to the bottom. We'll move on to the next question unless, Todd, you disagree with that.
No, 100%. And like I said, you're going to get your 7. You're not going to get the 10th. You're going to get the guy you have ranked 7th as the 10th catcher. So, anyway.
All right, Ryan asks, 2 questions. 1, what catchers in the NL get the biggest boost in value with the potential of the NL DH looming? Let's answer that one first.
Hi, I mean, people are going, JT Realmuto, he plays a ton as it is. Maybe I should have looked into a little bit more. I'm not sure. I don't think that I'm going to want to, I think I understand the concept, but I don't think I want to jump up my catchers because of that. I think it's a risky proposition to pay for a catcher because you think he's going to get maybe Will Smith jumps up even higher than he already is. But I think it's risky. Wilson Contreras is going to play a ton anyway. If he gets another 50 at bats, I don't know that you want to jump him over someone with better skills.
I'll throw in three people here. Travis d'Arnaud, I think he's got some decent skills, and he can serve as a DH. When he bats in the middle of the lineup, so they might want to use him more. Tyler Stevenson, I think he's got that high average. I think they could throw him more. And Dalton Varsho, to me, can pick up some at-bats. I mean, they throw him in the outfield anyways. He might just gain a lot of at-bats just from being in the outfield as well.
I do like Varsho a lot as far as an answer to that question.
Yeah.
The other guy, I don't know they're going to change a lot of the other guys. d'Arnaud has turned into such a good defensive catcher. I don't think he's going to lose a ton of at-bats to behind the plate.
I'm going to double up on Will Smith there, because in the beginning of the season, Max Muncy's still hurt. He's not healing properly, so he may not be ready. If he's not ready, that whole infield configuration is different, and they always wanted Will Smith's at bat in there, so you can see him some playing time at first, even at first, if that's the issue, and DH definitely.
How about Austin Nola, maybe, to answer the question, to give an answer? I'll say Austin Nola.
All right. Next question that Ryan asks is, when diving into a player debate between two players and at the same ADP range, at the same position, what are the best advanced stats to look at for both pitchers and hitters? Todd, I'll let you go first.
There's no one size fits all answer as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. You have to look at the stats that are most apropos to the type of player. If it's a guy who wants power, I want to know the exit velocity on fly balls. If it's a guy who wants speed, I want to know the team tendency, et cetera. So I don't think there is a one size fits all answer. I think you have to look at it on a player by player basis. But what I will say is I am big into component analysis, as we've been talking about a lot about exit velocity. To look at the StatCatch page and just see average exit velocity, that doesn't tell me anything. I want to know ground ball, fly ball, and line drive, and et cetera. And even ground ball and line drive. You mentioned, Reuven, about the catcher. I'm going to be talking about this on PitchCon coming up if I'm allowed to plug that, the pitcher list. PitchCon coming up. But it's and I've written about it, so I'm not breaking any news here. But the exit velocity on ground balls and fly balls is just and compared to BABIP, it's random. For the only thing that really matters is exit velocity on fly balls and power. So you take a look at the red levers and say, wow, this guy's got a high exit velocity. He should be hitting for a high batting average. It's just not the case.
Yeah, I'll throw out just a couple of them. Obviously, Todd is completely right. It matters what type of hitter. There's no one size fit all. But barrel rate for me for power hitters, that's something advanced you can look at. Stolen base, I look at stolen base opportunities. Look at the manager situation. That's something you can get. For batting average players, strikeout rate. That's always a good component. Pitchers, the quickest thing to look at is K-minus BB. That tells you a quick answer.
Yep.
It gets you there very quickly. Fastball velocity, track that, see what it was, how it's going. That's another one to look at the trends. Swinging strike rate, that's another quick one to look at to see if the strikeout rate agrees. So those are a couple for you. And we'll do one more question. Michael asks, how much playing time do you think Alejandro Kirk gets for the Blue Jays? Hey, if he got 400 at-bats, he'd be a top 5 option. Kirk is he's a highly skilled catcher. The Blue Jays have a catching dilemma. They've got 3 catchers and plus a prospect in Marrero lurking. ATC has Kirk for 285 at-bats, Jansen for 307, Reese McGuire for 113. And with those 285, Kirk is a $4 catcher going for about $3, about a 17th rounder. So you're right, and a lot of his value comes from plate appearances. I'm not sure that he's going to get a lot more than that with the situation. The biggest way he can increase it is a trade. Either he's traded or somebody's traded out of the organization. Then he would get a little bit more of the playing time. But, with guys like that, you got to really monitor what the Jays are doing week to week. If he's picking up extra DH at-bats, if he's picking up more playing time, those skills are excellent. He's a guy that of anybody in the catcher field could exceed his value by a lot, much quicker if he gets just a little bit more playing time. You agree, Todd?
Well, yeah, of course. I don't agree he's a top 5 guy with 400 plate appearances. I think he's top 10. Right. Top 5 is a reach. I mean, but that's not really the point. Well, I mean, Toronto's in go for it mode. And if Danny Jansen hits the 223 with a little pop that he did last year, they can get by with the defense. But if he's hitting back at the 180 range, the 200 range, Kirk could get that extra playing time. It's possible. If you can pay market for Kirk, there's a lot more upside than there is downside.
Agree. Do you agree with that, Ruben?
I totally agree, and I think we said the exact same thing about him last year also. I think we're all just waiting for Danny Jansen just to bottom out or get injured, then Alejandro Kirk comes back up. Now, the one thing is that Kirk has a good bat. They can't put him at DH because their outfield is so loaded, they have no room to play him, so it's either catcher or nothing. So, I mean, I think he will get the bulk of the playing time there. Reese McGuire, and not as much, but for some reason, the Toronto organization seems to love Danny Jansen. Otherwise, Alejandro Kirk would have been in there already.
Yeah, I can't understand it, and I'm a Danny Jansen hater. I just can't see why. Look at the batting averages: 247, 207, 183, 223. You got a guy in Kirk who's gonna have actually a really good batting average. What are you waiting for? Is the
he's
defense...
not a great defender.
Right. But I was going to say, is the defense so much better that you can't increase the playing time? Really depends what you need. Maybe it is because the Blue Jays have such a great lineup. Hey, we need the defense to help out the pitcher more. Maybe that's the theory. I'd say 285 what ATC says. I'd put my money on the over for 300, but not much more than that. All right, Ruvain, injury report. You go ahead.
Okay, I only have 2 players because it's so hard to get stuff out now because of the lockout and everything. But Jake Myers, he actually came out. He came up with the Astros last year and had a chance to actually win the opening job for this year. But he had surgery this past November for a torn labrum in his left shoulder. He will not be ready for the beginning of the 2022 season. And the question would be how much playing time and how quickly he recovers from that. Another guy is Sixto Sanchez. This is how we're now getting our injury information by videos via Instagram. So Sixto Sanchez was shown throwing or just having a catch. He had surgery to repair a capsule tear in his throwing shoulder. It did not look like he was throwing comfortably. It did not look like he was at all using much power at all. I'm I'm very concerned about that. And the fact that there's a lockout going on, you don't have the normal training staff. You don't have the normal medical staff that you would have because the players have nothing to do with teams right now. They're being locked out. So they're not getting the same treatment, and it may hinder players like Sixto Sanchez from coming back sooner.
Interesting. Todd, do you have an Instagram account?
No, I do not.
All right. Well, that settles that one there. Anyways, that is the end of our show. This was a great one. As you all see, Todd really knows his stuff. Helped navigate the player pool. Did our start to the ATC undervalued projections with catchers. Fantastic stuff. You can follow him on Twitter at Todd Zola. As he mentioned, he writes for ESPN, RotoWire, and, of course, at Masters Ball. Did I forget anything? You want to plug anything else, Todd?
Real quick, I do the Saturday show with Clay Link from RotoWire on Sirius MLB Network Radio, not the Fantasy Channel, the MLB Network Radio. We're on Saturdays from 4 to 5 p.m. Every Saturday. So that's the other thing to plug. And soon enough, hopefully they'll invite me back to the show, the Fantasy Show on Sundays. But we'll go just with the Saturday one for now.
That's right, and I believe that I actually guest hosted when you were out sometime over last summer, I think, on that show on MLB Network. So,
yep, absolutely.
Thank you for having me as the replacement for you. I hope I lived up to your standard on that show there.
I think you did okay. I think we're all right. We'll try to get you on. We're having Nick Pollock on this week to talk about PitchCon, but I'm sure we'll get you on talk about ATC in the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Yeah, and you mentioned PitchCon. You'll be on it, Todd. I'll be on it as well. My tradition, of course, this is the third year of PitchCon that Pitcher List and Nick Pollock sets up. My tradition is actually to go on the very first presentation right after Nick Pollock, so he gets me a really good lead. So thank you for that, Nick. Yeah. So hey, nice placement. I love it. So looking forward. Going to talk about the data of baseball and a little bit about projections. So stick around for that. Ruvain, why don't you plug your stuff?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. And I guess I'm at the point where I'm retweeting Instagram videos. And you can also follow me on Rotoballer during the season. I have an injury article every week to get you ready for the free agent pool.
Yep, and you know me, I'm Ariel Cohen. I'm writing over at Fangraphs, Rotographs, CBS Sportsline, and over at Rotoballer. The ATC projections are here, and they're at all three of those sites. You can get on it, as we mentioned at the top of the show, so please do. And you can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY, and of course, you can listen to us right here on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. We'll get you covered and ready for the 2022 draft season, which is, hey, it's starting already. So there you go. Once again, thank you so much to our guest this week, Todd Zola. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, have a good one. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.